No, Prabhuji, I am not the host. I'm not sure who is the host.
Okay. Bal Ganesh, you mentioning that I can enter the key and become the host. Where do I find the key? Are you referring to the passcode?
No, Prabhu, the meeting, whoever have created, right? So they might
No,
be having-
I can do that. Just give me a sec. I'll do that.
Okay, good to see you.
Yeah, thank you, Prabhu. I was having some issues with my internet.
Sure.
I made you co-host, Prabhu.
Thank you. So, welcome all of you today for our continuation of the Anand Vrindavan Champu. And I thought of 2-3 different ways in which we could take this series ahead. I'll quickly tell you what all we did, summarize what we did last time, and then we will move forward from there in our discussion today. So essentially in the previous session, I introduced Anand Vrindavan Champu and how Kavi Koranapur was blessed by the Lord and how the 10th canto pastimes have been elaborated in this book, especially the Vrindavan section has been elaborated. And then we discussed one specific pastime, that is the pastime of the attack by the demoness Putana. Now, each one of these pastimes is actually, many of the pastimes in Vrindavan, which are described in the 10th canto, have been elaborated by Kavi Koranapur. And he has also described pastimes which are not given in the 10th canto. So today we'll try to do two things depending on how much time each section takes. I'll describe one pastime which is hinted at but not described in the 10th canto. And we'll discuss how one pastime which is there in the 10th canto has further been elaborated. So let's begin. Now, in the Putana pastime, last time I discussed how there were many distinct points which came up. And among those distinct points, one of them was how was Putana able to lower the guards of everyone, and how Yashoda felt devastated because it was as if she felt that I had failed Krishna. I have failed Krishna by not doing, by myself in my presence, handing Krishna over to this demoness, this Putana. So we look at a 10th canto pastime elaborated. That is the look at the Kaliya pastime. There are specific points within that pastime will I describe. And then 10th canto pastime, you could say uncovered. Uncovered means it is very concealed in that is the awakening of the Purva Rag. So Purva Rag awakening. These two pastimes we will try to discuss today. So now while we are discussing these pastimes, let's first look at some broad principles. That at one level, Krishna Leela, I think I had mentioned this briefly last time, that the Leelas of the Lord are like ongoing revelations. Ongoing revelations means, or you could say expanding revelations. It is like a musical performance. When there's a musical performance, there's one person who comes and say is a solo singer. And that person is singing and they're a very, very good singer. But then they're joined by 1-2 musicians. And then they may be joined by 10-15 musicians. And then as they're joined by more and more musicians, what happens is the performance becomes more and more impactful. So it becomes like eventually it becomes like not just a solo singer, it becomes like an orchestra. So basically, how is it that the original reciter of the Lord's pastimes is like the solo singer? So for example, this is Ramayana, it's the Valmiki Ramayana, which is the Adi Kavya. That is the description of the that is the original solo singer. But from that, there are many other saints and poets and devotees who have glorified Ram Leela in different ways. And they are like the other participants who come in. Now, when all of them come in, what essentially happens is it becomes like a combined performance thereafter. And when this combined performance goes on, that's how it becomes like an orchestra. So when it becomes like an orchestra, now what is the criteria for whether something works as an orchestra is that all the subsequent singers, all the they could be chorus singers, they could be just musicians. The point is, key thing is they are all the performers should be in harmony. Now, if somebody is singing and somebody starts playing kartal out of tune, or somebody starts playing an instrument out of tune, then everything gets messed up. So similarly, the various Krishna Leela various Leela expanders, we can say, they reveal the further aspects of the Leela need to be in broad harmony. Now, what is the harmony? The three kinds of harmony is there. There is Leela, there is Tattva, and there is Rasa. So what do I mean by Leela, Tattva, and Rasa? That whoever is telling a further enhancement, they can't contradict the original story. If they contradict the original story, then that doesn't work. You can say, okay, this happened like this, but along with this, this also happened. That's possible. Can all of you hear? Okay. So there has to be harmony in terms of Leela, and there has to be harmony in terms of Tattva. That it is not that we can have Mayavadi explanations or explanations where Krishna merges with his devotees merge with Krishna or anything like that. And then broadly, the rasa has to be enhanced. Rasa has to be maintained, and not only maintained, enhanced. Now, not in all the pastimes, all these things may not happen, but these are the broad criteria. So the Lord's pastimes are not frozen, they are dynamic. They are being revealed more and more. So now, sometimes some very important pastimes may not be there directly in the scriptures. So if we consider over here, in the Lord's pastimes, there's a description of, in Bhakti-Rasamrita Sindhu, describes about the pramanas. Pramanas means the sources of authoritative knowledge. So he says there is Shastra Praman, and then there is Loka Praman. So Shastra Praman in this context is the pastimes described in Shastra. And the Loka Praman in this context is, this refers to the pastimes described by, say, special people, special authorized people like the Vrajavasis. Loka means people, like the Vrajavasis. So there are many beautiful pastimes described by the Vrajavasis. And if we go to Vrindavan and we associate with the Vrajavasis, not just any Vrajavasi, but associate with those Vrajavasi devotees, or some of our devotees who associate with Vrajavasis, from then we hear so many pastimes which are actually not there directly in any scriptures. So Loka Praman is also important in its own way. It brings its own flavor. So for example, the famous pastime, gopis offering the dust of their feet to Narad Muni for relieving Krishna's headache. Most of us have heard about this pastime. This pastime is not described in any Shastra. And yet, there is no other pastime that illustrates the mood of the selfless service of the gopis as this pastime. So when the gopis offer What are they doing when they're offering this dust? They're actually taking it forward from there, and they are making sure that, so through this pastime, what is happening is that the gopis are not just simply romantic lovers. They are there, but their love is a matter of self-giving. It is not a matter of self-seeking. So the level of self-giving that is there in that love is illustrated through this pastime. And if somebody made a rigid rule, okay, we'll accept only pastimes that are given in Shastra, then pastimes like these cannot be accepted. And the major flavor of Krishna Lila, which pastimes like these bring about, they would be lost. So it's important to understand. Now it's that Krishna Lila is an ongoing revelation. It's an ongoing revelation. Now that doesn't mean that there can be any kind of speculation. Anybody can come up with any pastime and then that will be accepted. No, there are always limits to what can be accepted and what will not be accepted. But now what are the basis for these limits? There is something called, if you consider Ram Leela, one of the things where something becomes unacceptable is there is something called the Jain Ramayana. In the Jain Ramayana, what happens is, did I mention this last time in my class?
Yes, Prabhu.
Okay. So I mentioned the Jain Ramayana last time. Okay. So I mentioned about how it's completely deviant from the standard narrative. And the idea that Lord Ram will eventually become a Jain or will heal from Jain sadhus instead of Vedic sadhus. So that is not accepted by the mainstream at all. So the idea is that overall, there is, just like if somebody is singing and there is somebody who comes and starts playing a musical performance and they completely go off track. Instead, then stop, don't sing over it, don't play this instrument. Tell them to stop. So like that, there is a natural order that is there. There is no such thing like a central. The Indian subcontinent was very large and people were not so centrally under one authority. There was no, if you consider the Indian tradition, there's nothing like ISKCON's GBC to authorize this pastime is right and this pastime is wrong. But what would happen is naturally, there would be a process of what doesn't gel with the rasa, what doesn't gel with the harmonize with the tattva, that would be rejected. So now with this quick background, let's move forward. So now there is before I move ahead. So Naman Prabhu has asked about, can you narrate the pastime of the gopis giving dust? Let's see, we'll come to that. If we get time, we'll do that. I think I don't want to, I was just giving that as an example. I don't want to go into that pastime at this stage. But the essential outline of the pastime is that when Krishna has a headache, at that time Krishna tells that no, Krishna can't have a headache, but it's not that he can't have a headache. He can do whatever he wants. So a headache doesn't control him, but as a part of his Leela, he can choose to have a headache. And when he does that, at that time, what happens? Krishna tells Narad Muni, who is there, I have only one medicine that will work. There's the dust of my devotee's lotus feet. And no other devotees are ready to give him his dust. Narad Muni goes everywhere. And finally comes to the Raja Gopis and they say, oh really, Krishna has got a headache. Immediately go to the river, Yamuna, and they dip their feet in the river and then rub their feet against the Yamuna dust on the banks of the Yamuna, and they get a big cloth bag and they give it to Narad Muni. Narad Muni thinks that, hey, do you understand what you're doing? Are you so, he doesn't say that, but he thinks, are we so uninformed? If the dust of your feet touches Krishna's head, it's like our touch feeting, that it's like, are we touching the deities with our feet? He says, that is horrible, you'll go to hell. The gopis say, the very thought that Krishna is having a headache, that itself is hell for us. That itself is hell for us. Therefore, just go now. Just go and relieve Krishna of his headache. If you can relieve Krishna of his headache for even 1 minute, we are ready to go to hell for eternity for that sake, for that purpose. So that is the love for Krishna. That is their love. And this selflessness of the gopis is illustrated in this particular pastime. So now that is the gopis pastime. The Jain Ramayana basically is a narrative created by the Jains. Because what happened is, this is very common in religious traditions. That if somebody is a very authoritative person, then you try to show how that person actually followed our tradition. And then that's how what happens is, your one's tradition gets the prestige of that tradition. So Ram and Krishna are quite well known in the Vedic tradition. So what the Jains did was, they rewrote the Ramayana, in which they showed that actually when Lord Ram was there, Jainism was also there. And when Lord Ram would go into the forest, he would meet the sages, but all the sages would be Jain, and he would give him Jain Updesh. And finally, when Sita entered back into the earth, and Lord Ram realized that there is no happiness in this world. And that's when he became enlightened and he became a Jain. So that is their telling of the story. It is preposterous, but it is there. So this is complete deviation from the standard narrative, and that is rejected. So we could say this is the broad outline. Now, with this in mind, let's try to look at some aspects of Krishna Leela. So I said I'll discuss two things: the Kaliya pastime, and depending on the time available, we'll go to the Purva Raga. So what I'll try to do today is, I will discuss the 10th canto, some things from the 10th canto, and based on that, we'll see how those particular verses or those particular themes have been elaborated in Anand Champu. So these are chapters 20. The Kaliya Leela is described in chapters 16 and chapters 17. Chapter 16 describes basically Kaliya's, this chapter 16, 10th canto, 10.16. The 16th chapter describes how Krishna came into the coils of Kaliya and how Krishna came out of it. And then the backstory, where did Kaliya come from? That's what Shukadeva Goswami is asked for Parikshit Maharaj. And that backstory comes in the previous chapter, or in the next chapter, 17th chapter. So let's look at 3-4 verses from here and see what is described over here, how it is elaborated in the 10th canto, in Anand Champu. So for example, so here it is described that Viprushyamata Vishadormi Marutena Bhimarshitaha Briyante Tiragayasya Pranina Sthirajangamaha. So Viprushmata, that means here what is happening is, even a few drops of water. Vishad Urmi. So Visha is poison. Vishada is that which spreads poison. Like a Varada is the Lord who gives blessings. So Vishada is that which gives poison, that which spreads poison. So Vishad Urmi. Urmi is waves. So what is described over here is that the waves Marutena Bhimarshita. So the waves of this Kaliya Kund, it was a water body. When the waves would be created and waves would start moving because of the Maruta, because of the wind, then some of these, out of those waves as they were moving, some drops would fly up. And when those drops would fly up, if there were any birds flying overhead, just by Abhimarshitaha, contact with them, Mriyante, they would die. Tiragayasya, those who were present on the shore. So it was two things. One is the birds flying overhead, just by touching of the drops, they would die. And sometimes the water droplets would flow onto the coast. And Tiragayasya praninaha sthirajangamaha. So just by the contact of the water, sthirajangama, whether they are moving or moving, those living beings would die. So what is the point of description over here? Whenever the Bhagavatam is describing a particular theme, how it goes out describing theme is often by poetic elaboration of the key principles. Poetic elaboration of key principles means it is describing over here how each one of us, how it is Krishna is going to go into Kalyadaha. But the poison was so great that what to speak of going inside Kalya, that even going inside Kalyadaha, even near that Kalyadaha, there would be great danger. So this is basically describing Kalya's potency. The potency, what is it being described over here? That his potency was so great that it is not the bite by Kalya. It's not bite by the snake. It is not touch of the water touched by the snake, or rather it is not entering into the water home of the snake, but it is just touched by a few drops of water touched by the snake. This just indicates how toxic he was. It's how toxic, how dangerous it is. You know, nowadays we may have, like, one of my friends, actually, he's doing his PhD in weapons of mass destruction. You know, what they are, what they have done. And he told me, he said he had gone to Hiroshima and Nagasaki and he met people, survivors over there. And he said, even today, what was done over there, the cities are more or less come back, but even now there are people who are born with deformities or they get health disorders. So the effects go on. So that is how toxic it was. So Kalya was like that. That is contact with something which is contacted, that could prove fatal. So the bombs have already exploded long ago, but now, even now, the residual consequences are there. So now here, this point is described in the 10th canto. Now, how does Anandandavan Champu elaborate that? Anandandavan Champu elaborates it in 2-3 different ways. First thing it says is that the question comes up that was Krishna not aware of this before? Were the Brajvasis not aware of this before? So why would they entertain a place like this? Why didn't Krishna do anything about it till? So he describes 2-3 things over here. And he hints at something. There are some things in the Sanskrit, some things which are there in the translations. The Kavi Karnapur's Anandandavan Champu and even Jiva Goswami's Gopal Champu are actually very artistic books. And because of that, even when we translate, you know, there are often the translations also require, at a straightforward level, the translation is very simple, but another level, the translation also requires commentary. So to understand what is being actually said over there. So the broad understanding is that Krishna is growing. And as Krishna is growing, he slowly starts exploring places. And when he starts exploring places, there is one thing about Krishna that it's almost, whether it is Krishna or Ram, it's almost as if he is never the aggressor. What do I mean he's never the aggressor? It's like he hardly ever is the first person to attack. It's only when he is attacked, or it could be his loved ones are attacked, will he counterattack. So we see this even in the Ram Leela, that even when Lord Ram goes to the forest to guard Vishwamitra's fire sacrifice, he doesn't go out searching for the demons like Marichi and Subahu and Tataka. You know, he guards the sacrificial arena, and those demons come and attack, and he kills them. Similarly, Lord Ram, although he knows that the demons are terrorizing the kingdom, or the sages in the forest rather, Lord Ram doesn't himself take battle. or launch an attack against them. It's when they attack him that he counters them. When Sita is abducted, or when because of Shurpankhar comes first, and then Trishira and the other demons, Kharadushan, they come. So then Lord Ram defends. And in defending, he destroys all of them. So if you see, the point I'm making is that Krishna and Lord Ram and Lord Krishna both, by their example, show that they are hardly never themselves the aggressors. They try to avoid aggression, although the Lord is all powerful. For the Lord, victory is guaranteed. But still, the Lord doesn't become the aggressor himself. So, example, Ram versus Rakshasas. And if we consider, even in Krishna Leela, what happens is the demons come to him and attack him. Even when Krishna sees Aghasur, Krishna enters into the mouth of Aghasur. At that point, Krishna has no intention directly of killing Aghasur. But when Aghasur closes his mouth, then Krishna expands. So similarly, what happens over here is Krishna gives Kalia his space till his Gopas are. When the Gopas are killed, now we may say, isn't everybody in Vrindavan belonging to Krishna? Doesn't Krishna allow all the Brajavasis? Yes, that is of course true. But of course, simultaneously there are degrees. Krishna has loving relationship with everyone, but there are some with whom he's far more intimate than with others. So among the degrees of intimacy, what happens is Krishna, he waits. He doesn't attack himself. It is when Kalia's poison kills his Gopas. Now we say, isn't the Gopas who went there and they drank the water, they didn't know about it? Well, yes, they all knew about it. But at that particular point, such things happened in such a way that the Gopas felt thirsty. They forgot that this is Kalia Daha. They didn't realize that things were wrong, that this could be dangerous. They thought that Krishna will protect us. So they didn't go there to kill Kalia. They went there simply to quench their thirst. They were playing and they went just quench the thirst. And there are different narratives described about how it happened. But the point is that the Gopas, it is said, immediately died. And here in the 10th canto, there is an amazing echo of the first canto. So actually this itself in the Bhagavatam, you could say first canto and 10th canto, this itself is a beautiful study of how the two are related. So in the first canto, if we look deeper into Sanskrit, what is described is that Parikshit Maharaj had died and was revived. So when the Parikshit Maharaj, Uttara's, the Brahmastra sent by Ashwatthama came to her womb, and Parikshit Maharaj, baby Parikshit at that time actually, he had died. But although he had died, what happened was the Lord fought off the Brahmastra and then he revived Parikshit Maharaj. Or rather, he revived Parikshit Maharaj and he kept fighting with the Brahmastra. And Parikshit saw, oh, who is this wondrous being who is saving my life, who is saving me from certain death? And Para-ikshita, that lifelong he was looking for that person, trying to find that person. So similarly, what is described in the 10th canto is Gopas had died and were revived. So they were revived by Krishna's glance. So Krishna just glanced at them. And as he glanced at them, the Gopas were revived. So what is happening over here is, in the Kalia pastime, there are many, the significance over here, what is described is Kalia was so toxic. But what exactly happened? Those particular details get elaborated, get revealed further. And in this way, what happens is, there is enhanced resource for remembrance of Krishna. That's what we discussed last time, is that the Leelas are meant to be remembered more and more. And we can remember them from multiple perspectives, from multiple frames of direction. And that's how we can move forward. So now, let's look at two more things. Can you see, okay, were you seeing my The 10th canto, or were you seeing the PowerPoint? Okay, you're seeing the PowerPoint. Let's go to the 10th canto. Thank you. So now, as they move forward, what's happening over here is so what happened was when Krishna entered into Kaliya's Daha, and Krishna initially seemed to challenge him, but Kaliya came and caught Krishna, and Krishna seemed to be overpowered. Tam nam na. So what happens over here is tam naga bhoga parivitam adrushta cheshtam alokya tat priya sakha pashupa dushartha Krishne arpitatma surudartha kalatra kama dukhanushoka bhayamud diyo nipetuhu. So tam naga bhoga parivitam. When they saw that he was encircled by the coils of Kaliya, adrushta cheshtam. So cheshta means endeavor. So what had happened was that initially it appeared that Krishna was trying to fight, resist the coils of Kaliya. But after some time, it saw that Krishna was not even resisting. So is Krishna trapped? Has Krishna followed unconsciousness? Has Krishna died? What has happened? Adrushta cheshtam. When they saw that he's not even endeavoring, so cheshta means endeavor. Adrushta means it was no longer visible. Whether he was endeavoring, they could see no endeavor at the visible level. So it's like somebody's very sick and near death. And then the person is moving in pain or doing some movement and then suddenly stop. And then when anybody is observing, like a sense of dread fills into them. This person dead? What has happened? So like that it was. Alokya tat priya sakha pashupa bhishartaha. So at that time, that Lord, who was the dear for everyone, for his sakhas, for the pashupa is the cowards, bhishartaha, they were all greatly disturbed. Why were they disturbed? Krishne arpitatma. They had offered to Krishna their everything. Suhrud artha kalatra kama. They had offered themselves, Atma is themselves, their relatives, their wealth, their wives, their spouses, kama, all the desirable objects. Everything that was theirs was for Krishna. Dukhanushoka bhayamuda dhiyo nipetuhu. So they became filled with immense agony. Dukkha anushoka. Bhaya. There was lamentation, there was distress, there was fear, and this complete bewilderment. Dhiyo nipetuhu. They fell down. So now, in the 10th canto, actually, there is a description of intense emotions that are associated with Krishna Lila. So what has happened? Krishna entered into the Kaliya Daha. And Krishna initially, when he jumped in, it seemed as if he was going to challenge Kaliya. And Kaliya found that quite impressive. Kaliya saw that, okay, who is this person? What makes him so powerful? And when he saw that, he came forward to fight, and Krishna initially seemed to be about to fight, but then initially Krishna let himself be overpowered by Kaliya. And what was Krishna doing? Actually, if you consider among the various pastimes of Krishna, this is among the few pastimes where Krishna lets everybody see what he's doing. Now, in the most cases, if you consider Putana, you consider Trinavarta, you consider Shaktasur, even if you consider Aghasur or Bakasur, at least in the first few pastimes, nobody really understands what happened. Somehow Krishna is miraculously saved. That's what with Putana, Putana, Trinavarta, or Shaktasur, it's a card. Now, if you consider in Damodar Leela, nobody actually, the Gopas see that Krishna actually pulled and brought the trees down, but nobody believes them. And then if you consider Bakasur, it's described that Krishna rips apart the giant duck. But then it's only the Gopas who see it. And everything happens so fast that they don't even really clearly understand. Krishna Krishna was there, this demon attacked, and Krishna saved the demon. Or Krishna saved us all and killed the demon. But they can understand that. But exactly how everything happened, that is very, very difficult for them to figure out. So they just don't understand it. And later on, we will see in the 25th chapter, when Damodar Leela will come, sorry, when Govardhan Leela will come, that's when Krishna lifts Govardhan Hill for everyone to see. But before that, in this particular pastime, Krishna, in one sense, is revealing his glory in his fullness. But before he reveals his glory in his fullness, what does he do? He lets the emotion of the devotees, of the Rajavasis, rise to a pinnacle. Rise to a pinnacle. What is happening over here is that generally in any story, in any narrative, it is the tension that draws the narrative forward. That if there is no tension, if there is no suspense, if there's no anxiety, then what happens is, then if it's straightforward, okay, this is the villain, this is the hero. See, if right in the beginning of a movie, the hero just beats and defeats the villain, and then the same pattern keeps happening throughout, then you will say, okay, the villain is already weaker, the hero is already stronger. So what makes the narrative gripping, consuming is when there is tension. So tension comes. So tension is what is required. Tension, uncertainty, anxiety. So tension comes when who is stronger is unclear, or when the opposite side, you could say the villain is stronger than the hero, or at least appears to be that way. So that's when the story becomes interesting. Okay, what's going to happen now? So Krishna, he initially jumps in heroically, but then it appears, oh, he has colossally misunderstood, or he has colossally underestimated his opponent's strength, because the opponent completely overpowers him. Now, what is Krishna doing? Why does Krishna let himself get overpowered like this? So it's described that when this happens, now, in one sense, at the time of the Vrajavasis, there was no phone, there was no 911 that you could call, or 100 you could call. Oh, Krishna is in danger, please come and help. No, but what happened at that time was that there are omens that are spreading. So Anand Namji Buddhist has a very telling detail. It says that there are these Adi Bhautik, Adi Atmik, and Adi Daivik. So, and he says that the Vrajavasis start feeling some inauspiciousness in all of these. That means they start feeling some inauspicious transformations in their body. Their body starts ticking, twitching. And now I won't go into the technicalities of the omens, but these lakshanas, something is terribly wrong. And they look up in the sky and they see the sky suddenly seems to have become dark. They look around on the ground and then they see that like a black cat is moving on the road, or they start seeing these inauspicious signs everywhere. It's generally what happens is, when there is the fear that there is some fear, when there is a fear that there is some fear, at that time we can start feeling like a pit inside the belly. We can start feeling as if, oh, what is going to happen? What danger is going to come? It's almost as if many people have like a sixth sense. They get a foreboding that something terrible is going to happen. So the Vrajavasis hear this. They sense this. And then the Gopas start screaming, Krishna, what has happened to you? And some of the Gopas run back to Krishna. And somehow or the other, by the Gopas screaming, by some of the Gopas running, and Vrajavasis also start seeing the inauspiciousness, and they start thinking, something must be wrong with Krishna. And then Yashoda and Nanda Maharaj and others, they ask, okay, where is Krishna? And then they come to know, on that particular day, Krishna has gone without Balaram. Krishna has gone without Balaram. And they become all the more fearful. Krishna doesn't have his older brother to protect him today. And they all start running. So now here is a very endearing description by Kavi Karnapur. Normally we know that when Krishna plays his flute, the gopis leave everything and run toward Krishna. And all of their family members try to stop them, but they don't stop. They somehow or the dodge and they try to run and get to Krishna. And those who are stopped, they just can't maintain their life. They give up their life itself. But in this case, there's something entirely different described. What happened is that when the Vrajavasis hear that Krishna is in danger, all the Vrajavasis start running. And Kavi Karnapur describes that mothers and fathers, they forget even their small newborn children. Just leave the children and start running toward Krishna. And amazingly enough, these small children who may be a few months old, they see their parents running away, and instead of crying, suddenly they also develop running ability. And they also start running toward Krishna. And then there are some elderly people in Vrindavan who can barely walk. But even they forget that they can't walk, and they also start running toward Krishna. So all the Vrajavasis are irresistibly pulled toward Krishna, the entire gamut. So whereas the Venu Geet attracts the gopis in Madhurya Ras, in this case, the fear that Krishna is in danger attracts everyone. It attracts everyone completely. Everybody puts everything else aside and just runs toward Krishna. And what is Krishna doing over here? So as the omens are seen, everyone is united in their despair to reach Krishna. Now when they reach Krishna and they see Krishna in the midst of the toys of Kaliya, they are horrified. And they see slowly Krishna become motionless. So now, within Mother Yashoda's heart, she's so completely filled with the anxiety that I have to do something or other to protect Krishna. She wants to jump into the Kaliyada. Now, there are few things as painful for a protector, for a parent, for a guardian, as to see those whom they are meant to protect in danger and to be able to do nothing. So Nanda Maharaj and the Gopas are also agonized that what is happening here? We can't do anything about it. But still they have that realistic understanding that actually we can't do anything about Kaliya. We can't do anything. They're feeling completely helpless. Yashoda Mai, she feels that if I can't do anything to save Krishna, then what is even the point of living? Therefore, let me just jump in. And then she has to be restrained by the other gopis and held back. She's restrained and she's held back. And then what happens? At that time, she starts looking and Krishna slowly starts becoming motionless. Krishna seems to be initially struggling, but he becomes motionless. And then, now everybody in Vrindavan is in anxiety. So what is described in, what is described briefly in the 10th canto is elaborated. The emotions of the various characters, their actions are described in a little more detail. This is the embellishing, the expansion of the revelation of Krishna Lila. Now let's look at what happens with Balram. So now what is described over here is, what does Lord Balram do? Tam tatha kataran viksha Bhagavan Madhavo Balaha Prahasya Kinchinno Vacha Prabhavagyo Anujasya Saha. So Tam tatha Kataran Viksha. Viksha means see. Tam Satha means all these Vrajavasis. Kataran, how afflicted they were. In such immense agony they were. Bhagavan Madhavo Balaha. He knew the power of Lord Madhava. He knew Prahasya Kinchin no Vacha. He just smiled little bit. Kinchin means little bit, not a full smile. Prahasya Kinchin no Vacha. So this no is not the English no, it is the Sanskrit no. Na uvacha. That means he didn't speak anything. Prabhavagyo anujasya saha prabhavagyo. Why? Because he knew the prabhava. Prabhavagyo. The prabhava is the prowess. He knew the prowess of anujasya saha, his younger brother's prowess. So he remained silent and he smiled. Now the smiling is quite, in one sense, shocking. There's a whole, I got around 6 pastimes in Ramayana and Mahabharata of how Krishna's smile or laugh seems to be inappropriate, but it's actually supremely appropriate. So here, why is Balram smiling? Now, is it because Krishna is in danger of losing his life, and seeing him in the danger of losing his life, the Vrajavasis are in the danger of losing their lives. And at such a time, why is why is Balram smiling? So here to understand this, what is happening is Balram is Prabhavagyo. He knows what is happening. So in one sense, if you consider that, say, suppose somebody is performing a drama, and when they are performing a drama, say if you are part of the team that is actually organizing the drama. So there's a drama director or the director's friend, and they all know how the drama is going to turn out and what is going to happen. And if at that time, say they are watching from the backstage, or they will be sitting in front also, and they're watching, and then when they see how well the characters in the drama are acting, and they see how the audience is affected by the acting, and then they see, now in the drama the hero might be in great danger. The hero might be in great danger, and the villain might be about to swoop in for the final kill, and the next moment it might appear the hero is going to die, and the whole audience is aghast. There are gasps of horror among the audience. Now the whole scene in itself is horrifying. So if you consider the villain is about to kill the hero, so the whole audience will be petrified. But seeing the audience petrified, what will happen is the drama director or director's front will smile. Hey, this whole drama is going on very well. Everybody is acting perfectly well. So when they're smiling, they're not smiling at the distress of the audience. They're not smiling at the fact that the hero is about to die. They're smiling because they're seeing how wonderfully this drama is being enacted and how wonderfully the effects are coming as desired. So similarly, with respect to Krishna Leela, Lord Balaram is in the drama, but he is also outside the drama. He's a character over there, but he's also aware that this is a drama going on. So from that perspective, what happens is he doesn't speak anything. No vacha. He doesn't speak. But now what happens is, although in the Bhagavatam it is said no vacha, that he doesn't speak anything. But Kavi Karnapur in Anandanjapu describes that actually Balram speaks. And what is happening over here is, he says that Balram says, why are all of you worrying? This Kaliya demon is no danger to Krishna. Now Krishna can, in one movement, if he wants, he can destroy 100 Kaliyas like this. Krishna is just having a good time over here. And the Vrajavasis, they have respect for Balram, but they just can't make sense. What is Balram doing over here? What is he saying? Our dear Krishna is in danger. How can we not be in anxiety? How can we not be in anxiety? So what is happening? Now, is this a contradiction? The Bhagavatam says he didn't speak anything, no vacha, and Anandavacha this time he spoke. The point here is that his words have no effect. Like sometimes we speak something, and if that what we speak has no effect on the audience, then it's almost as if we didn't speak at all. Our words were of no use, practically speaking. The words did not shift the narrative in any significant way. So in that sense, the idea is Balram is marvel struck at how amazingly this Leela is being enacted. And in one sense, he tries to break the spell. He wants to break the spell because he can't bear the Vrajavasis to be in such distress. So nothing is going to happen to Krishna. But the Vrajavasis' love for him, Krishna is so much that they just can't come out of that spell. They're completely overwhelmed. And then when Krishna sees that the Vrajavasis are about to, especially Mother Yashoda, she cannot live thinking that Krishna's life is ebbing away, that Krishna's life is just ending. She can't bear it. And because she can't bear it, what happens is she thinks that I will end my life now. I can't live and watch to see Krishna dying. So therefore, what happens is that she just desires. When Krishna sees that, then Krishna says, this is enough. What am I going to do now? I am going to act. And then Krishna jumps up. Just suddenly breaks free from the clutches of Kali. Now, there are three different reasons given for at what particular time Krishna jumps up. So what's happening? Now, this is not only from Kavi Karnapur. As I said, that I'm using Anandam Champu as a template for giving or as a template or as a guideline for how we can enter deeper into Krishna Leela. So what is happening is Krishna breaks free. So why does Krishna break free at a particular time? So one explanation, as I said, is that Brajvasis can't take it anymore. They just, if it goes on for any more time, then they will die. They will die. They can't take it. And Krishna sees that they're going to die, so enough now. Brajvasis can't take it anymore. The second reason is that Radharani arrives. Now, if you know the geography of Vrindavan, what happens is Kalia is quite close to Nandagram. It's quite close to Gokul. But where Radharani stays is a little far away. Radharani in childhood stays in Barsana, and when she gets married to Abhimanyu, she stays in Raval. But wherever she's staying, that's far away. So for the news to reach there, and for the residents from there to come here, Krishna wants to do his magnificent dance on Kalia after Radharani arrives. He wants Radharani to see that dance. And that's why Krishna waits. Krishna waits for Radharani to come. And when he comes, when he says, she has arrived. Now my audience is there. Now let me start dancing. So the third is, now this is a more esoteric explanation. This is more of the Gaudiya Vaishnava explanation, that actually Krishna's power, so it's related with Radharani arrives, but what is described over here? Krishna waits for her to begin his dance performance. But the Gaudiya understanding is same thing. Radharani arrives. Now, by Gaudiya, I mean, this is some Gaudiya acharyas explain that actually Krishna gains power on seeing Radharani. That when he says, oh, my beloved Radha is here. And if Kalia kills me, Kalia is not going to stop with killing me. Kalia will eventually kill all the Brajvasis. He will kill even Radharani. and I cannot bear that. And then so it's there are different ways of understanding is one is that actually Krishna's power comes from Radharani, and in some renditions of Govardhan Lila said that actually Radharani is Vrindavaneshwari and Radharani gives power to Krishna, and that's how Krishna is able to lift up Govardhan. That's one understanding. So similarly, Radharani comes and Radharani gives power to Krishna, and that's how Krishna is able to fight against Kaliya. But another understanding is just the arrival of Radharani, it either galvanizes Krishna eventually or it galvanizes him to show his heroism to her. And that's when Krishna breaks free. And as Krishna breaks free, Kaliya is stunned. Now, the question might come that when Krishna was lying in the coils of Kaliya, helpless, why did Kaliya not finish him at that time? Why did Kaliya just not kill him immediately? So this was because of Kaliya's ego. What was Kaliya thinking? That I want to savor my victory. It's like if in a boxing match, is there, what happens is one boxer knocks out the other person and just walks around like I'm the king of this boxing arena. He could just use some more knockout punches and finish off the other boxer, but he just walks around. I have won. Who can fight against me? And sometimes that arrogance works. That pride comes before a fall. So that may give the other boxer the time to recover. So Kaliya on one side, he's so confident that he's going to win, that his arrogance gets the better of him. And what happens now with Kaliya is, this is a whole elaborate pastime. I just focus on two more details from this pastime. Krishna breaks free from Kaliya, and Kaliya is initially stunned. Now stunned means, so actually the word stunned, it can mean shocked, amazed. I'm stunned that this is happening. But stunned can also mean paralyzed and unable of thinking, like somebody's, like there is sometimes there are guns with bullets and there are stun guns. Stun gun means a person is not a bullet meant to kill, but it's a bullet meant to stun. So it just becomes, what happened? This small boy, I thought I had defeated him. What happened? How did he turn like this? Where is he gotten this power from? And then thinking like this, what happens is he tries to fight. Now Kaliya, I said, it has 1,000 hoods, and it's all his hood is trying to bite Krishna. So Krishna has only 2 feet. So it's 2 feet fighting against 1,000 hoods. And yet Krishna dances so expertly, so forcefully, so rapidly, that not one of the hoods of Kaliya can bite him. Before any of them can bite, Krishna's foot is pounding on it. So this is like by far, you could say the dance performance par excellence. This is by far the greatest dance performance. Now, of course, we can say that isn't the Ras Leela the greatest dance performance? Yes, of course, that is, no doubt about it. But that is more in terms of the reciprocation of love. Here, what is happening is that if you consider whenever dance is to be performed, what all is necessary? The dance floor. What is the condition of the dance floor is very, very important. Just like in cricket, that if the pitch is bad, even the good batsman can't bat very well. So the dance floor, if it is not good, then here you can't dance. So now Krishna in one sense has the toughest dance floor. Why the toughest dance floor? Because now most of us had never touched a snake, and better never try to also, at least not a live snake. A snake skin in itself is slippery. Then snake skin, which is wet with water, is even more slippery. And then wet snake skin that is moving rapidly and unpredictably. That is more slippery. So it is on such a floor that Krishna is dancing. And in that sense, Krishna's dance performance is exquisite, it is unparalleled, it's unmatched. She just keeps dancing, dancing. And for Kalia, he starts feeling as if Krishna is hitting him with thunderbolts. Krishna's feet, there's gentle lotus feet. For Kalia, they start appearing to be like thunderbolts. And he gets completely exhausted. Because of his arrogance, because of his defiance, he keeps fighting. But he just can't continue. And eventually starts getting defeated. Krishna keeps relentlessly pounding on his hooves, on his hooves. And the Nagapatni start realizing that he is going to die. Then they come forward, bringing the children in front. And they say, please, please forgive him. He's envious, but please forgive him. He tried to offend you, but please forgive him. They offered beautiful prayers. And what is happening over here? By bringing the children and themselves over there, they are attracting the same heroism that is there in Krishna. So, on the one aspect of heroism is to punish the wrongdoers. But another aspect of the heroism is also to protect the weak, the defenseless. So what is happening is when the Vrajavasi, when the Nagapatnis, they bring their children and themselves and they present them to Krishna, what are they doing? They are bringing like a tussle between two aspects of Kshatriya nature. One is to punish the wrongdoers and to protect the innocent, protect the harmless. They say that in punishing this wrongdoer, you'll be hurting us, you'll be killing us. Please don't do this. And Krishna, he resolves that tension, he accepts the prayers. But he accepts their prayers. But what happens is, Kalia sees, oh, my wives are offering prayers, let me also offer prayers. And he has offering similar prayers. And that's when Krishna forgives him. And then Krishna exiles him from there. He says, you have no place over here. You leave right now. And then that same Kaliya Daha, which is so toxic that nobody can even approach it, that becomes a place, that becomes like a pond, a water body for all the Vrajavasis to drink from, to play in, and to enjoy. So in that sense, Krishna reclaims Kaliya Daha. Now, I just described the outline of the pastime. In this, the pastime itself is much, much more intricate. But a couple of important points over here. Before we go into the, last time I discussed, we'll be doing this prayer meditation. Just a couple of points over here before we go into that. That at one level, Kaliya, this Kaliya's significance, what does it mean? There can be three levels of significance of Kaliya. One is, if you can say Vrindavan refers to our heart. Then in our heart, there are toxic desires like Kaliya. And some of these toxic desires are so toxic that so Kaliya represents the demoniac Asuri Pravritti within us, the demoniac nature within us. And the Gopas, they represent the divine, the Daivi Prakriti within us. But what happens is, this is a demoniac nature. Now, we all have this, some demoniac desires are there within us. But some anti-devotional desires are so strong that their very presence kills the devotional desires. It just completely kills the devotional desires. There can be many degrees of non-devotional desires within us. Some are just a little distraction. Oh, I want to watch the sports news or this or that or that. Some desires can be catastrophic. Some desires could be that, which we involve directly breaking the regulative principle, which involve doing something which is terribly offensive to Krishna and devotees, something actually grossly sinful, like various kinds of desires. So Kaliya represents those non-devotional desires, those anti-devotional desires, whose very presence kills devotional desires. And devotional desires are represented by the Gopas. So its very presence is fatal. So now, what can be done in such a case? It is Krishna who comes and he dances and drives away those toxic desires. So these desires, generally speaking, it is said that when we are fighting, it's not so easy to say no to a particular desire. I won't do this, I won't do this, I won't do this. Rather, it is better to focus on what is it that we can do. I'll do this, I'll do this, I'll do this, I'll do this. And while I'm doing this, then automatically the other things will fall away. I'll stop doing the other things. Hmm? Okay. So then what happens is that for the Gopas, so then in that case, that desire is so toxic that we cannot fight that desire on our own. It is that desire will just kill our devotional desire. So we need the presence of Krishna. We need so it is Krishna alone who can drive away those desires. Now it's interesting that these desires, Krishna kills some demons, but Kaliya is not killed. Kaliya is driven away. Now, again, there are many reasons for that. You could go into esoteric details. But the point is that this Asuri Pravritti can never be removed from the world entirely. Even in Satyuga, the Asuri Pravritti is there. Of course, it is not in power. In the Kali Yuga, it's always it is much more in power than in Satyuga. But we cannot drive it out from the world, but by Krishna's grace, it can be driven out of our world, from our heart. So we can make, even if it can't be driven out of the world itself. There will be places, there will be people, there will be places where the desire will be there. It can be driven out of our world. Our world means our heart and the things which are connected with us. So that can happen by Krishna's grace. So Kaliya refers not just to dark, sometimes it is said it refers to the ego, but the desires which are so dark, so anti-devotional that they just kill, they slaughter devotional desires. But then what happens is it is Krishna who comes. And when Krishna comes, it sometimes may appear that this Krishna Bhakti is also not working. These toxic desires are so much that even nothing seems to be happening. But even when nothing seems to be happening, what is happening is, as our desperate call for Krishna is intensifying, Krishna is waiting and watching. The Vrajavasis, they just, Krishna has died, now what can we do? We just go on with our life without Krishna. The Vrajavasis were waiting there. So a devotee waits in urgent despair. Krishna, please help me. And Krishna will help. Now at another level, now Kaliya's significance is that, especially in today's world, you could say that, like I said earlier, that the Leela is ongoing. It's a revelation. So I talked with several devotees who are working in the field of environmental activism. And they say that Kaliya represents the human tendency. Kaliya represents the human tendency to pollute and destroy nature and thereby humanity also. So what happens is, while Kaliya was present, it destroyed, Sthavara Jangam was destroyed over there, what was nearby. But then what came near, the Gopas came near, they were also destroyed. So like that, with the environmental destabilization that has happened because of indiscriminate human intervention. Now there may be debates about how fast things are going to fall apart, how much of that is caused by human beings. But there is no doubting that human action has had severe detrimental effects. So right now we may say it is not affecting me right now, but it will affect everyone. And Krishna's Vrindavan was pristine, but Kaliya's Vrindavan was deadly. Krishna's Vrindavan was filled with life. Kalia's Vrindavan. Now we cannot even say Kalia's Vrindavan. We could say the Kalia Daha, which is a part of Vrindavan. The part of Vrindavan was controlled by Kalia. That was lethal. Nobody except Kalia could live over there. And there's an additional twist over there that actually what was going to happen was, and as Kalia was becoming more and more toxic, his poison, initially what would happen is anybody who would come in contact with this poison, they would immediately die because of the poison. And then Kalia would consume their corpses. And that's how he would live. But what was eventually going to happen was that nobody would come near, and Kalia, despite being so powerful, there practically no other life form that was potentially either food for him or potentially enemy for him. Nobody else could survive. So like that, what is happening is this Kalia-like tendency within human beings to exploit nature indiscriminately, to consume whatever can be consumed. The result of that will be, it will eventually endanger humanity itself. The very source of that tendency will be destroyed by that tendency. So what is the solution? Yes, at a practical level, we can live in more eco-friendly ways. We can live in more, we can adopt a more green lifestyle, and that's important. But simultaneously, it is important that the Kalia mentality has to be removed. The Kalia mentality is removed by Krishna. What that means is, when we practice Krishna Bhakti, and when we get a higher taste to the practice of Krishna Bhakti, that is when we humans will be able to give up the consume, or at least decrease the consumerist mentality. I want this and I want that, I want that, I want that, I want everything. That consumerist mentality, when will it go away? When actually we are able to find this higher taste. So that's why it's important that we work to recognize that what is happening is we are in today's world in the need of Krishna. It's only when we have Krishna with us can we be protected. Otherwise, we will also be in great danger. Just as Krishna, just as all of Vrindavan was because of Kalia. So quite often they talk about, we want to protect ourselves from the environment. They talk about 3 R's. Now, environment talk about 3 R's. That is reduce, reuse, recycle. And all these 3 are important. Don't consume so much. If you have something, don't just throw it away after it becomes old. Try to reuse it as much as you can. So reduce, reuse, recycle. But actually, why would human beings want to do it? When every time we get a new phone, the new phone brings like so much prestige, and everybody looks in admiration at the new phone. Hey, there's a new gadget, a new device. Why would people want to do it? That's why we need a 4th R. And that 4th R can only come from Krishna. And that is raise. We need to raise our consciousness. Raise our consciousness so that we can find happiness from a higher source. Not just from the worldly products and the pleasure that they may give, the domination and the exploitation, the gratification from those things. So that is another significance of Kalia. And then beyond that, what Kalia refers to is also specifically, it is the ego that is intolerant to challenge to our authority. So one is that Kalia, as soon as Krishna came into his domain, what happened was, he said, no, how dare you come here? Just because you have come here, you are going to die. You have to die because of that. So now this can be among the most dangerous things. And what happens is, different people at different times get some different degrees of power. Sometimes some person might become a head of state. Somebody might become a king. Somebody might be the boss of a particular office. And when they become like that, so we can say that now we all have our Kalia Daha, Kalia Lake. That is where we have our authority. Now, of course, in today's world, very few of us have a place where our authority is unchallenged. But we all believe that in this particular place, my authority should be unchallenged. And then if anybody comes and challenges that authority, then it just, our ego rises in such a way, our ego rises like this, Kaliya hoods rise, similar ego rise. And we can, even ordinary people can become terribly destructive when they feel that their authority is challenged. Now, what happens is it is not just their authority that is being challenged. It depends on now all of us, our authority will be challenged at some time or the other. But what determines how a person responds? So it depends on where our sense of self-worth is coming from. If my only sense of self-worth is coming from my capacity to get others to obey me, then if others don't obey me, then who am I? What is the worth of my existence? So if it comes from our ability to extract obedience, then if we don't get that, then it's like Kaliya swoops out and all the toxicity comes in, wants to destroy everything. Now, of course, we all have responsible roles. And one aspect of responsible roles is sometimes to discipline others, to correct others, to guide others, to chastise others also. But that may be required. But when somebody doesn't obey, what do we do at that time? Do we just want to destroy that person? Or do we recognize this is the limitation of my authority now? And then what do? Okay, we try to maintain and salvage that relationship as much as we can. We have example of Srila Prabhupada. At the time of initiation, devotees would take a vow to follow the 4 regulative principles and chant. And then many of the devotees, not just ordinary devotees, rank and file devotees, but many of the leaders had difficulties in following those principles. So what did Prabhupada do? Prabhupada did not, how dare you make a promise and you take a vow and not follow it? I'll curse you, I'll condemn you. Prabhupada never did that. Instead, Prabhupada accommodated them. So Prabhupada engaged them in whatever way they could. So Prabhupada saw their disobedience not just a threat to his authority. He saw that this is just the result of Maya. This is the result of their weakness. And let me engage them as much as I can. So if it comes from our ability to extract obedience, then we will be destructive when we encounter disobedience. But if we are secure in our relationship with Krishna as Prabhupada was, then even if something goes wrong, even if people don't obey us, okay, we'll do our best, but we won't overreact. So the Kaliya within us can destroy our devotional desires. The Kaliya within us can destroy our devotional relationships, or the Kaliya within us can destroy the world where we have the opportunity to practice dharma and practice bhakti. So this Kaliya pastime is not just a historical pastime, it is historical. And in its details, it is gripping, but it's also a very eminently relevant pastime for all of us. And Krishna's subduing of Kaliya is the subduing of that dark, self-destructive side inside all of us. In some of us, it is more, some of us, it is less. But that can be destroyed by the Lord's mercy. And that is how now in Anandavan Champu, there are 2 different kinds of metaphors that are there. I'll conclude with this point and then we can have some reflections. We'll do our journaling also. That the one kind of metaphor is that which illustrates the themes. Okay, let me explain this important point here. That so if there are metaphors and Leela, so there could be different kinds of metaphors. So last time I discussed about how there could be metaphors to describe Leela details. Leela details means, okay, what did Putana look like? What did her body look like? What did Kalia look like? What did Krishna look like? Hmm. There could be metaphors to describe Leela details. Then there are metaphors to describe Leela significances or Leela significance. That, okay, what does the Leela mean? What does this Leela mean? So now, generally speaking, that this Leela significance, this is especially done by Bhaktivinoda Thakur. See, Bhaktivinoda Thakur was the first person in our tradition who actually encountered modernity. So it done in Chaitanya Shikshamrita as well as in his Krishna Samhita. So what is the nature of modernity? Before that, in the tradition, people focus on just simply on relishing Krishna Lila. It's so sweet, I just want to relish Krishna Lila. But as modernity came in, then, okay, these are stories, these are good stories, they're entertaining stories, but what do these stories mean? You want to know the stories. So it was, there were people who wanted to relish and they were always there. But there are also people who want to analyze, what does this mean? So for them, Bhaktivinoda Thakur gave non-literal meanings. And it's very significant that he doesn't freeze. This particular pastime means only this. No, he says, he basically says that there is a transcendental aspect of the Lord's pastime and there's a practical aspect. And the practical aspect is something which can be understood according to time, place, circumstance. So there are metaphors to describe the details within the Leela and metaphors to describe what the Leela itself means. So Kavi Karnapur focuses more on the first kind of metaphors, but Bhaktivinoda Thakur focuses often on the second kind of metaphors in his description. So what we did today was we discussed more of the second kind of metaphors and we elaborated on that. So by this, on one side, we can become deeply absorbed in the Kalya Leela as we understand it more and more. On the other side, we can see the relevance of the Kalya Leela to our lives. And then we can pray to Krishna with a greater amount of intensity, with a greater amount of personal connection, personal investment. So I'll summarize this pastime and then we will have the journaling exercise that we discussed last time. 3 things about Leela, which we'll discuss. So what we'll discuss here is that if you have to journal, so which aspect of the pastime touched you the most? Aspect that touched you the most and why? We discuss this, and it's very helpful if you could to personalize our relationship that touched you the most and why. The second will be that how can you engage that aspect in your remembrance of Krishna? How can we remember it more? How can we remember that particular aspect? I'm rephrasing the question as compared to last time, just to sometimes rewording a question stimulate thoughts in a different way. And last, how can you engage that aspect in your prayers to Krishna? So
last time we had 4, Prabhu. The 4th one was, how can I remember this aspect of Krishna during my chanting?
I think, yeah, that's true. I think that was a little difficult because then that raised the question. Other questions will came in that, should we remember something else while doing japa or not?
Right.
So I decided let's keep that out of it today for the time being.
Yeah, sure.
So praying and include japa also. But the overall idea is that this is how we can try to enhance our remembrance of Krishna. So I'll summarize before we go to journaling. And what we discussed today was how Krishna Leela is a dynamic revelation, and it's like a solo musical performance, solo singer being assisted by other musicians and other singers singing in chorus, and thus the effect becomes multiplied. But if somebody is out of chorus, somebody is out of tune, then they are told to move aside. So like that, there is the original revelation of the Krishna Lila, and there are other revelations by subsequent devotees, poets, singers, drama drama writers, playwrights, and they are all enhancing that Krishna Lila. And if it doesn't enhance, then they are sidelined. So there is the example of Jain Ramayana, and there is Shastra Praman, but there's also Loka Praman. And Loka Praman actually enhances our absorption in Krishna. I give the example of the gopis offering the dust of their lotus feet to Krishna to relieve his headache. Then we discussed about the Kaliya pastime, and gives some examples of how certain details which are mentioned in Krishna Lila in the 10th canto are elaborated. So for example, the magnitude of the poison of Kaliya, and the impact of Krishna being trapped in the coils of Kaliya. What is the impact on the Rajvasis? That is described in much greater detail in Ananda and Champu. How whereas Krishna's flute song attracted the gopis to overcome all obstacles and come to him, the knowledge that Krishna was in danger, it attracted everyone. They also started running toward Krishna. And then Krishna stayed in the clutches of Kaliya just to enhance the suspense of the pastime, so that there would be greater tension. And then he broke free when he felt that the Rajvasis could not take it any longer, that they would just die. And when he saw that Radharani had come, he wanted to perform for Radharani's sake. Or when Radharani came, he became energized by Radharani's presence over here, by her benediction. And then he started performing. And then he completely subdued Kaliya with a supreme dance performance on a floor that was slippery because it's a snake skin, but it was further slippery because it was wet, and further slippery because it was mobile and unsteady. But still Krishna danced over there and subdued Kaliya. And Krishna eventually sent Kaliya away. He spared him because his wives petitioned him, and Krishna's Kshatriya side was awakened. One side is punishing the wrongdoer, but also protecting those who are weak and defenseless. So Krishna sent him away, and Kaliya represents multiple things. One is that toxic desires which can just kill our devotional desires. It can also represent the ego that arises when we are unable to control. It also can represent the environmentally destructive mentality that is threatening the entire ecology. In all these cases, it is Krishna's dancing on that Kaliya that can release us from it. So you can pray to the Lord that he manifests himself in our heart and subdue and exile the Kaliya that might be there in the heart. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
So we have about 5 minutes. We can write down these 3 aspects and then we can discuss it. Okay. Yes, Shri Krishna Prabhu.
Yeah, Prabhu, I
Would you like
was, yeah. So I was quite, I like quite,
Would you
you
like
know,
to share
the
your screen?
killing. Sorry, can you hear me?
Yeah, would you like to share your screen? Are
I
you
wanted
written
to,
out
no,
on your
I can share my, but I can type it, no problem. And
Okay, okay.
also,
If you're not typing it, you can speak also.
yeah.
That's okay. We
So,
would prefer to type it, but
yeah.
go ahead.
Yeah. So I like the aspect of Kalia, killing the Kalia propensity in us is more important than killing Kalia, basically. And this is, we can practice as well as remember all the time by dealing with people in general. Um, uh, at the same time, while chanting as well, we can remember. This reminds me of, Sant Dhaneshwar's Pasayadan, in which he says, Je Khanchi Venkati Sando, Ta Satkarmi Rati Vado, Bhutam Paraspare Pado, Maitra Jivasi. So वाईट लोकांच्या मनातील दुष्टपणा नष्ट हो आणि त्यांची सत्कर्माची गोडी वाढो सर्व प्रडिता मात्र पाणी मात्रांमध्ये मैत्री वाढो. And the second stanza is दुरितांची तिमिर जाओ विश्व सधर्म सूर्य पाहो जो जे वांछित तोले पाहो प्राणी जात सर्व विश्वातील प्राणी मात्रांमधील अज्ञानाचा अंधार रोवो विश्वातील सर्वांनी प्रधर्म स्वधर्म प्रामाणिकपणाने पालन करावं त्याला जे हवंय ते तो मिळावं. So like that. So Poseidon actually resembles to quite, but in this propensity that you explained, Prabhu.
Yeah, I think it's a very universalist kind of prayer that is there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. So actually, even in, I think, Prahlad Maharaj's prayer to Lord Narasimhadev in the 5th canto,
Yeah.
where it says, may all envious beings become peaceful. This is not in the 7th canto, but this is in the 5th canto where the universe and the various aspects of the universe are being described. It also says, let everybody become pacified.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Prabhu. I'm sure that you liked my, any analogy there, but
Yeah, it's nice to connect some aspects of the past time with something which you already know. Thank you.
thank you, Prabhu.
So we have some devotees who have already typed. I'll read that out. If anyone would like to speak it also, I'm fine that. So Pitambar Gopal Prabhu is, we have hope for Krishna's dance in the form of holy names and Katha to eradicate Kali-like tendencies from our heart. Yeah, that is our hope, and that is a hope we should never lose. Because one of the characteristics of a devotee is Asha Baddha, having hope against hope. So by remembering how Krishna rectified Kalia, it's interesting. Did Kalia Krishna give him a dear position? There is a description of that in, I think, in the in the Goswami's commentary on this pastime. He says that Kalia was sent away, and Kalia went to a place where people were non-devoted, and he spoke Krishna's glories. And seeing him speaking Krishna's glories, even Garuda came over there, and Garuda was also captured. So he did good to others, and he was able to overcome whatever enmity or antagonism was there with Garuda also. And we can pray to Krishna that let these things happen. That's beautiful. Thank you, Prabhu. Now, Prasanna Prabhu stated that how the aspect of love of Rajivasi supersedes everything. Yes, they are ready to put everything aside for Krishna. That's most touching. See, in every tradition, in every path, we need certain models, not just as intellectually they tell us what is the right thing, but they inspire us to do the right thing. So this aspect will help me to oversee the problems we face in our life and focus our attention on the Lord. Yeah, I know if we focus only on Kalia, this problem and that problem, sometimes Kali has 1,000 hoods. So we can't fight against all the fronts that we are facing problems in. Sometimes our own arthas seem to be attacking us from 1,000 fronts. So at that time, it focus more on invoking the Lord's presence. That's nice. He's saying that I'll pray at the lotus feet of the Vrajvasis to help me gain more faith and become more sincere in my service to the Lord. And that will deepen my prayers. Thank you, bro. That's beautiful. So Rakesh bro stated that the ability and greatness of Krishna to subdue our ego and to subdue our toxic desires.
Wow. Amazing.
Beautiful. Thank you very much. So I see one or two questions. Would anyone else like to share any reflections?
Kavita
Before we go to
Mataji.
the- Yes, please. Okay, Kavita Mataji just typed here that Kaliya mentality can be driven away only by Krishna. That touches my heart the most. Okay, that Krishna with Radharani. When Krishna is with Radharani, he gets more energy to drive away such non-devotional desires. So we can remember Krishna with Radharani. Yes, that's beautiful. Jeevanena dhane nityam Radha Krishna katir mama. They are the treasure of my life, the divine couple. And Rakesh Prabhu is also saying that we have full faith in Krishna's greatness. We can be like Lord Balram in times of distress. Remain calm and balanced. And that's a nice realization that there is Krishna as the Paramatma who is a detached observer. And there is Krishna as Bhagavan who is like the impassioned lover. And there are both aspects. So Krishna says, Udasina Vadasinam. Now I am situated like detached in the heart. But then Krishna also says that Ishto Sime Dudhamiti Tato Vakshami Te Hitu. You are most dearly loved by me. Therefore, for your benefit, I am speaking it. So there are both aspects of Krishna. And sometimes for us also, we need to know which aspect of Krishna to connect with at different times. Sometimes when some devotees would have some difficulties, Prabhupada would just say, Maya is extremely powerful, what can be done? Other times Prabhupada would say that, I want to connect with the devotee. Write a letter to that devotee, or how can I contact the devotee? Ask him to come and meet me. Ask her to come and meet me. So Prabhupada would respond differently at different times. Yes, there are times when we can be like Balaram. We can pray to be like Balram. Then we have Deepika Kini Mataji. It's beautiful that that the stage is slippery at it. Krishna was dancing for the gopis' pleasure, for Radharani's pleasure on that stage. That's beautiful. So if you compare the stage to the material world, then this is also like a slippery stage. We can dance with devotees to cooperate and achieve bhakti. That's a nice reflection. Bhaktivedanta Thakur would say that this world is not just a dangerous place, it is a treacherous place. Dangerous means where we know there's danger and we can see it. Like there's a road sign and there's sharp curve ahead, danger, go slowly. But treacherous means there's no sign, it seems to be like a smooth road and suddenly it has a terrible curve. The world is also like a treacherous place, so it's not so easy to dance in the world. But we can pray to Krishna and that's how we'll be able to do that. It's wonderful. And Bal Ganesh Prabhu has also shared, said that Krishna can drive away our anti-devotional desires that break our oaths and our sincerity towards him. So when such desires come up, we feel ourselves low or impure and we keep Krishna away. And that's how they further overpower and conquer us. But instead, at those times, we need to invite him more into our heart. It's a very important point. That, okay, how should I put it that? Just because we fall down, Krishna doesn't reject us. Rather, because we fall down, we reject Krishna. And that is a great tragedy. I'll repeat this. Just because we fall down, Krishna never rejects us. But what happens is, because we fall down, we reject Krishna. We start thinking, this is not for me, this is not going to work for me, this is I'm too conditioned, this is not working. So if you remember that part, that Krishna is never going to reject us. It's like, so there is this could be a whole different topic of discussion. There are times when we need to see our failures in bhakti as moral lapses. Okay, this is something which is terribly wrong. I should not have done this. but there are times when we need to see them a little more clinically also. Clinically means it's like a medical problem. So if my sickness is worsening, the solution is not quitting the medicine. The solution is taking the medicine more regularly, more diligently, maybe in a greater dose. So there are times when we have to take the moral aspect, but there sometimes we just have to become a little more clinical about it. That the problem is not that I had these lapses. The problem is that I'm not connected with Krishna adequately. So let me connect with him more and more. Okay. So very nice reflections by everyone over here. Then, yeah, Nabal Ganesh was also saying, so now we have Prabhavati Mataji saying that Krishna waits for the right time to turn things around. That's a nice thought. He remains trapped in Kalia's coil till Kalia thought he would be victorious. So sometimes Krishna lets our strings loose, but he pulls us back at the right time and we realize we are on the wrong path. Yes. So now sometimes it's difficult for us to know what is the right time, what is the wrong time. But the key thing is that no matter how many times we get deviated, we need to stay reconnect with Krishna. And in one sense, we can never know why Krishna made Prabhupada wait till the age of 70 to get his first significant success in his outreach. Now in retrospect, we can say that only glorifies Prabhupada more. That Prabhupada was so faithful and so diligent through all the dangers. That's true at one level, but still, at that time, Prabhupada went through a lot of discouragement and defeat. We didn't know why specifically it was happening, but it was Krishna's plan. Yeah. Now, so sometimes we are taken oaths with our senior Vaishnavas, and if you're not able to keep those vows or oaths, then we feel very bad and we stay away from them. Well, in that case, it's important to have connections with multiple senior Vaishnavas, including those who will be understanding and accepting when we have difficulties. It's not that anything and everything that we do is to be accepted, but there are times when something we are trying, it's not working, and all that can be done is that if some devotees are very, very so dismissive or so critical or condemnatory that further discourages us from bhakti, that is terribly, and that is not exactly healthy. It's like a doctor is finding that a patient is diabetic and the patient has still taken some sweets and their condition has become worse. The doctor, you could say, doctor has to some extent express concern or even anger. But the doctor becomes so angry that the patient stops going to the doctor itself. Then whose problem is that? Well, you could say the patient problem because patient is becoming sick. But in this case, it's also from a spiritual perspective, it's also doctor's responsibility to ensure that the patient keeps taking the treatment. So then we also need different devotee guides. So for example, when Kala Krishna Das or Balabhadra, when some of Chaitanya Mahaprabhus fell away, or they had some problems, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's associate servants. So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu rejected them, but his associates didn't reject them. His associates engaged them. And when they engaged them, that's how they found some service and they're able to move on. So that's why it's Guru, Sadhu, and Shastra. Sorry, it's Guru and Sadhu. It's not just Guru. There are multiple aspects through which we can connect. So, Prabhavati Mataji is further saying that, why did this touch you the most? I've experienced in a few times that Krishna has saved me from wrong path, including prayers. We can pray that Krishna help us realize that his plans are the best for us. We may not realize it at that time, but in future, in his time, circumstance, and place, we'll understand it. Yes. It's said that we look at the present and we plan the future. Krishna looks at the future and plans the present. So we look at the present and say, this is good, this is bad. Why is this bad thing happening? But Krishna looks at the future and plans the present. So that's wonderful, actually. So if we can look back at our past and understand what has happened in our lives, how it turned out for good, then we can have that faith for the future also. So Rakesh Puri is saying that the dance floor represents our various toxic and treacherous desires. It's like the wet, slippery, moving curd. Krishna can knock them all down by various life experiences. And when we are elevated in Krishna consciousness, we can smile and we can see Krishna's hand dance in our lives. Yeah, that's true. It's tough because sometimes it seems almost as if Krishna is not there when Krishna is dancing. And there's one problem here is that sometimes we identify with these desires instead of identifying that these desires are my enemies. And then when something happens in our life, we feel as if it is we who are being attacked. Sometimes it's not that we are being attacked, it is rather, so just like Kalia felt that he was being beaten, but Krishna was beating out the toxicity within him. So sometimes if we identify too strongly with our toxic desires, then what happens is we feel as if Krishna is hitting us only. And that is when we might become averse to Krishna. But if you understand, okay, these desires that are being frustrated, these desires because of which I'm getting some consequences, they are different from me, they are not me. Then we can move forward and cope with the distress that we experience at those times. So thank you very much for sharing your feedback and sharing your reflections. And we'll discuss about the Purva Rag, its development and its and we will continue it in our next session about the Purva Rag, its awakening and its manifesting. So thank you very much. Shri Anand Vrindavan Champu ki jai, Shri Kavi Karnapur ki jai, Shri
His Grace-
Prabhupada.
His Grace Chaitanya Charan Prabhu ki jai.
Hare Krishna. Thank you very
Hare
much.
Krishna.
Really.